Okay. Now I lost my train of thought. See, these recordings just ruin everything. No, I've said that pronunciation is actually Majchrzyk, and I've heard everything all the way up to Mackerfisher, but I've never heard magic before, and I like it. So I think I'm adopting that pronunciation. I'm not good at updating my bio. I actually was put out to pasture by my publishing company about 8 years ago, so I'm basically retired at this point. That was a great talk. You know, it's because we always have ideas in our head about how it ought to be, but if you look at all these famous exchanges with Zen masters, where the student comes, "What is Buddha? 3 pounds of flax, dry shit on a stick." So these little ordinary everyday things that happen to us really are the essence of practice. That's what practice is pointing to. All that fancy language that comes along with Buddhism is just for people who have that kind of inclination, and to point out that there is an absolute component to the universe that's like vast and beyond our understanding. But it expresses itself moment to moment in these little events like that. And as you said, when you get caught up in thinking, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, at that point, you're not here, you're not awake. And then the wonderful thing that you just did when you were awake, as soon as checking mind comes, say, "Oh, isn't that cool?" Splat. You hurt something or kill something or miss something. So that was actually a really good short talk. So does anyone have any questions?
Hello, Paul. It's Ting here.
Hi, Ting.
It's unusual not seeing you every year.
I
You are
know.
always Paul Magic for all the Kyoche people. So I have a question. Every time we come into your interview room, we were just rolling on the floor. I was the one who always liked to quick in and quick out, but I never got out very quickly. So slowly I realized that koan practice is quite important. And can you say something about why koan practice?
I never said koan practice was important. Yeah. It's not the only part of practice. I mean, when we take a look at somebody who's ready to be a teaching, we look at the totality of what they do. So some people can be really wonderful at Kongan practice, but maybe the rest of their life is not as clear as it could be. But I love Kongan practice, and to me, I like to say it's almost like it shows you very simple situations, and then it puts a lot of smoke and mirrors around it. So it has a lot of traps to catch your usual way of thinking about things. And then there's something perfectly clear and direct right in the middle of all of it. And it's just fascinating to see how easy it is to miss what's right in front of your nose and go chasing all of these opposites and things like that. So I don't know. There are people who just hate Kongan practice and just never get into it, and you have to find a way for them to practice. Some of them are really wonderful Buddhist practitioners. A lot of people think that Kongans are some kind of quiz, and that when they don't get the answer, they've failed. And for them, it's much more painful than it could be if they just took it as Dharma play. But I love the Kongans myself, and to me, they relate to real life situations. And a lot of times I found, like, I answered a Kongan in the interview room in the old days when I was doing a lot of them. And, you know, I finally got to the answer by trial and error or whatever, kind of like I had, sometimes in the cartoons, you'll see a target and then the cowboy will shoot everything except the center till only the center is left. And then finally, oh, there it is. And then afterwards, some life situation would happen and I'd say, oh, that's what this Kong-an was about. And people say that to me also, that someone recently was in a dilemma where he couldn't win either way. And he kind of said, oh, now I understand what that up a tree was about. I mean, it comes to life for you. So I think they're wonderful, but they're not the only way. They are, our school uses them and very skillfully, I think. Any other questions?
Paul, I have a question. This is Jennifer. How do you, and speaking of Kong-an still, how do you suggest to your students to work on their homework, to work on their Kong-ans? Do you have any advice for that?
Well, first of all, it depends on what their what difficulties or anything they're having with them. But in general, I mean, because I found myself, when you hear the question, the Kong-an, something flashes in your mind almost immediately. And we don't believe it. It can't be that simple. And then we go off and chase all the pieces of it. So when you're doing that hit, right, in our style, first thing you do is hit. And I know when I was teaching, when I was giving interviews up at Kilche and monastics would come from Korea, I just couldn't help noticing, particularly some of them, when I would ask the question, they would like muster all or anything, they would go, you know, it was like they were complete. So if you use that hit to just really dispel all of the thinking that the Kong-an is intended to set off, then something clear is there. So trust the first thing that appears and go with your intuition. Otherwise, just try to treat it as Dharma play. If you have that feeling that it's more like a quiz. Although sometimes there's no one way for people. Sometimes you want people to really get frustrated and you want the Kong-an to drive them crazy. So it depends. It really depends on that person, the situation, how long they've been working on it. It's a lot of things. So there's no one answer to that. But in general, let all your thinking about it disappear with that hit and then just come forth. The minute you hear the question, what's the first thing that appears? It's amazing how often that's correct and we just don't believe it. And then we can spend years chasing the parts of the Kong-an that were meant to take you off course. But that's good too. The other thing, if you've spent years working on a Kong-an and going off on tangents, that's actually part of the point of the Kong-an, to show you how you react to something very simple in all these ways that don't hit the point of what's right in front of you. So you get to see all the ways that your mind fools you and carries you off in all kinds of opposites thinking and directions, good and bad, things that have nothing to do with what's in front of you. So that's what I'd say. Any other questions?
How did you come to practice?
How did I come to practice? People gave me Zen books at different points in my life. Musicians are always fiddling with different kinds of spiritual practices, yoga, anything that can help you just be more open and clear and take away nervousness and things like that. So I started doing yoga, and the yoga center it's where actually Zen Master Paul Majchrzyk went. It was the Integral Yoga Center. So it was more than just a physical practice. There was a strong meditation practice there. And I had heard a lot about Zen, but I had read a lot of Rinzai texts, and I thought if I went to a Zen center that people would just start cracking me with a stick the minute I walked in there. So I was hesitant to go. And but I loved reading Zen, and I loved the iconoclastic. I like the way we like heckle our, like in Zen, you can even make fun of the Buddha himself. You know, I remember there's some commentary in there. I think it's about the story of the Buddha holding up a flower, and the commentary says something like, he gave them dog meat and told them it was filet mignon. I was like, it's such a wonderful way, which is a compliment. It's a backhanded compliment, but I loved all that. So finally, it was during the first Iraq War, when we were so proud of our bombs and our planes, and how we could destroy this country in a matter of days. I was just devastated by the whole thing. And at that point, I decided I'm going to a Zen center. I don't care if they beat me with a stick. I need to break through my whole way of seeing the world. So I found Quantum. I found the Chogi International Zen Center. And while there is some hitting, it's only if you ask for it. So that part turned out not to be true. And then I began practicing and never stopped. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, Paul. First of all, thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
My question, I think, is more about our everyday practice and your encouragement and maybe teaching for those of us that, all of us, really. I mean, on a scale, I mean, some may be just beginning now and wondering, how do we practice on our own when we're not with a group, when we're not sitting in a Dharma room with others and practicing? How do we carry that over into our daily lives and continue practicing regularly? And what if anything, do you have to say that would help us understand how to make our practice stronger?
So you're talking about, when you say carry our practice out, then you've already made practice into some kind of special state of mind that you want to carry around with you in different situations. So you've already started creating some kind of separation. And that's really not the point of it. So we do formal practice. And formal practice, we just said we make everything as simple as possible so we can see. Even when we've set aside this half hour to be together, be still and just see our minds when there's nothing to do. That shows us, because we've cut off our usual outlets. We have to be quiet, right? All the things we don't want to do. We have to be still, we have to be quiet, we have to not react. So in that space, we get a sense of what our mind is like when we're out there and we haven't had all these outlets shut off. So over time, I would say that practice just seeps into your life. And if you start, I mean, so just the way in meditation you see all kinds of thoughts coming up that have nothing to do with what's in front of you except the brown floor and sitting still. When you then go out, it happens by itself. As a matter of fact, most of the time we are practicing. We just don't realize it. So bit by bit in the outside world, that whole question of what is this comes up by itself because you're developing a different habit in your formal practice, which appears by itself. So I think that's kind of what the little talk he gave before, when we start thinking, now my practice is working, then at that point you're thinking about your practice and then you miss it. So I think Dae-Soon used to give the example, and it's a driving example, no less, that when you're driving, you just steer and you see, red light go, red light stop, green light go. I'm a New Yorker, I don't even drive, so I could give you good MetroCard swiping analogies, but driving, I'm not so good. But the point is, he said, if you start practicing while you're driving, so you start thinking, now I'm going to be clear, now I'm going to be clear, while your mind is caught up in trying to be clear, you don't notice the light is red and you drive right through it. So that is what can happen if we need to be careful about what the point of practice is. That's why you say, just do it. Just return to this moment. Just be awake here and now. That's all this practice is about. It's very simple. Is that any help?
That's fine. There's one thing that I'd like to add, and it's like, okay, when we're not in the Dharma room, when we're practicing on our own, what do you advise? Bowing, chanting, sitting, the various forms of practice that we have. Do you utilize all of those in your practice? Do you encourage others to do that? Or is there a need to find something that you can connect with in your daily practice?
There will be practice forms that we like and we connect with. There are practice forms that we don't like and we don't connect with, just like everything in this world. So it's good to use all of the components of practice, not just the ones you like. I do all of them. I know there was something that Jacob said that I can't quite remember, but it's something like, not wanting or not having the time to practice, and that's the best time to do it. So I find even now, when I get up and cycle over to the Zen Center at like 4:30 every morning, so I can get there by like 5 for our morning practice. I do that like 3 or 4 days a week. Every day when the alarm clock goes off, I'm like, no, you're not doing this to yourself again. I mean, I go through the resistance every day, but I've gotten used to listening to it. So at a certain point, it loses its intensity. And I just go. And I never want to practice. I'm never sorry I have. I'm never sorry I did it. So that's a funny thing about small I, right? Conditioned I just wants whatever it wants to do right now.
Thank you.
I'm going to say
Hello?
something.
Oh,
It's not really a question. I just want to thank you for being here. I'm a New Yorker. I lived on 2nd Street between B and C, on 7th Street between C and D. I know very well the Strand Bookstore and Keel's Pharmacy and Odessa on Second. I know that whole area so well. And I'm just so happy to see that you're still there and the Dharma is still going on there. So thank you very much. And I'd just like to make an offering. Katagiri Roshi said this very similar to what you just said about the bicycle. He said he doesn't like, he never gets used to a cold shower in the morning. He never gets used to it, but he stands up in it every day. So I kind of just thought that was similar. And I understand you're not being a driver. So I understand that very, very well. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, and with more intense forms of practice, like doing a weekend retreat or a whole week of Kyolche or 90 days of Kyolche. Part of the point of that is to have all of this resistance come to a head through the intensity of practice. It's a wonderful thing to see all of this this resistance to practice like build up into this huge ball of resistance and emotion. And then all of a sudden, at some point, it just breaks by itself. And then you get this wonderful sense of serenity and calmness and just being there. So when we practice harder in these, and we allow these things to come to a boil, then when they disperse, it's a much more conclusive understanding. It sticks with you in a different way. That's one of the, for me at least, one of the main reasons I do that harder practice of long retreats.
We have time for one more question, and I think someone was in the process of asking a question.
Hi, I just had a question about maybe music, but you said you, or the bio said you're a guitar player, a flamenco player, and maybe you started your, going to the Zen center, maybe trying to deal with anxiety. So maybe two questions. One of them is, did it ever work? Did you get less anxious playing? And then number two, when did that become, oh no, I'm doing this for other people, not for me? Thank you.
I started practicing Zen mostly after my performing career was done. I didn't do much, but I had experiences along the way that kind of showed me when I heard Zen, and it helped me realize Zen is just a formalized way of teaching things that we all get at times in our life. So in my case, I wanted to make a good impression as a musician. I wanted people to enjoy it, but that turned into I want to be good. And of course, there's some incredible guitarists out there. I was never one of the greats. So then I started comparing myself and wondering, are people even going to be satisfied with my playing? So I found I went out that I was very nervous before performances, just because I wanted to do well. And that nervousness itself was causing me to not be able to play the way I could. So I tried all kinds of things. People had all kinds of advice about what to do with performance nerves. Try deep breathing. Try telling yourself that, there's no one in the other. But essentially, none of those work because, first of all, the originating problem was still there. Secondly, I was just cutting myself into more and more pieces. So instead of just being there playing the music, it was this extra person saying, breathe, breathe, and it'll be okay. So I found all these techniques were just making it worse. So finally I decided, I'll just be nervous because that's That's simpler than all the things I'm doing. But then we had a few times, there was one time I remember specific, but it happened fairly frequently, and I sort of, it made a impression. One day, I had a whole warm-up routine, you know, how I would get my fingers flexible and warmed up, and I would play some scales. There was a whole routine I would do. One day we got stuck in traffic and got to the hall literally 5 minutes before the performance. This was with a dance company, so you know that's even worse for dancers than it is for guitarists. Nevertheless, I had no hope, and this was this really difficult virtuoso piece that they had choreographed. That was my first piece, so it's like, oh God, this is just gonna suck today. You know, there's nothing I can do. I went out there. It was the best performance I ever gave because I gave up. I didn't have a chance to do any of my prep. I wasn't thinking, am I going to look good? I just gave up, and then it was all there, just the way I played when no one was around. So afterwards, of course, when I heard about Zen, then that experience became clear to me, you know, when you just aren't comparing yourself to anything. Some point, though, I also do remember someone was saying to me, so when you tell me about all your difficulties with nervousness, I was talking to somebody who helped with these things. He said, the only thing I haven't heard you, I've heard you talk about yourself. I've heard you talk about the audience. Never heard you talk about the composer. So why not, or the notes themselves? So why not just dedicate yourself completely to the notes and giving the composer the best hearing possible and forget who's out there. And that was really helpful, to just immerse myself in the notes themselves. But if you try, if you play, then you know. If you start thinking about what you're going to play next, that's the worst thing you can do. It's already there. So this whole business of intuition and before thinking, you know, when we say don't know, we're talking about our before thinking radiance that already knows what to do in any situation. And, you know, if you've been practicing for a while, it's just becoming music. There's no difference between there's no separation. I don't even know what to say. There's like, it all just happens. So music is a wonderful, and the arts are a wonderful way, martial arts, anything. Right? Practicing is just immersing yourself in whatever you're doing just now. And as soon as you even say, am I immersing myself in what I'm doing, you've already made you and someone who's checking to see if you're immersed or not. So you've already cut yourself into three. So we see that for a while and eventually, so that's what practice is in everyday life and anything we do. Just stop all the extra stuff or catch it. What is it? Daesun Sunim like to say, someone asks him, do you have checking mind? After all, he says, yes, I have checking mind, but my shut up mind is much stronger. So there's some good advice for whether it's formal practice, everyday life practice, music practice. Yes. Shut up mind is your good friend.